I'm going to start with the comments on a Dark Watchers page. Comments from Andres of Bakersfield, California, in August of 2021. I was driving home from a beach trip with my girlfriend in 2016. Going through Cuyama, it was pitch black outside. We saw a large shadow figure glide across the road in front of our headlights. No notable features, just a large, dark, shadowy creature. If she wasn't awake to confirm what I just saw, I would have chalked it up to me being tired, but she saw what I saw. We let it go until a few days ago, when we brought it up again, searched shadow people in Cuyama, and learned about Dark Watchers in Santa Lucia. This is so crazy to learn. We aren't alone in this experience. Then there's Dan of NA, Arizona. Back when I was a teenager, I used to go hiking in the desert and a mountain range where I lived, 7 miles outside of Blythe, California. One afternoon, I went deeper into the mountain range than I had ever hiked before, when I felt like I was being watched. The hairs on my arms stood up. I quickly started looking around, fearing a mountain lion was nearby, when I looked up towards the top of the mountain and saw a small cave-like opening at the top of a sheer wall. There, looking out towards the valley, I could see a hooded human figure. I could not see its face, since it looked like it was covered by a thin veil, but the hood and cloak looked tattered and ripped. The figure made no movement. I turned around and started to walk back the way I came, and never went back to that area of the mountain range. That area was not traveled, since there were no dirt roads or tracks, so who knows what was up there. All I know is that it was not human, and I've never been back since. This was back in the mid-90s, writes the poster. Then you have Michael of Thousand Oaks, California. I've camped a few times in the Santa Lucia Range, near to Cone Peak, right near the coast. And we were camping up on some coastal ridges there, overlooking the ocean, and definitely experienced some very strange energy. My first time up there were 3 of us, including myself. One person and myself both actually spotted one of the watchers up on a high ridge, partially obscured by low-flying clouds. Neither of us were familiar with them at this time and chalked it up to a tree. When we slept that night, we felt an indescribable discomfort and decided to keep driving north the next morning. Anonymous of Stockton, California, says, today my boyfriend and I were driving from Arroyo Grande to Stockton. This is in September of 2018. About an hour outside of Arroyo Grande, we saw a dark human figure in the hills. It was several hundred yards away from the road and seemed to be trudging laboriously uphill in the 95-degree sun. Despite rubbernecking multiple times to try to get a better look, we could distinguish no identifying marks, no seams of clothing, no hint of shoes or anything, just a solid black image walking up the hill under the burning afternoon sun. There was a small station with a tank and a satellite on the opposite side of the road. I wonder if we didn't see some strange ritual. Donnie of San Marcos, California wants to know, what is the difference between shadow people and a dark watcher? I've never heard of a dark watcher before. I did have an experience of seeing a shadow person at my home in Texas, but the description of it also fits a dark watcher. Brimmed hat, still, very still, just watching. Anonymous of Paso Robles, California says, seen them multiple times in my lifetime. Living in the right spot, in the area where they're from, they seem to have different clothing than described when I see them. But every time I do not feel alarmed at the sight. Anonymous of Ojai, California. I was hiking up a remote trail up the 33 in Ojai. I was about an hour up the mountain, No people, no cars in sight. As I was hiking, I had this eerie feeling I was being watched. I looked up at the top of the mountain. There was a black figure. I waved jokingly, not really thinking the object was a person. It waved back, thinking I was maybe tripping, or that it was a tree waving in the wind. I took a puff of my cigarette, only to see the figure blow out a plume of smoke as well. I started seeing it flow, and I say flow, almost floating vertically. I ran like hell back to my car, spraining my knee in the process. Sally from We Don't Know said, in August 2017, I live in the country in Canada. I saw a 7-foot man very slowly walking along a fence line. He seemed to be all solid shadow. But because he appeared to be behind the 6-foot fence, I didn't get a good look at him. Every time it is twilight, I look out at all the fences to see him again, to confirm what I saw, but I haven't seen him since. Could you help me find out what he was? Well, keep reading, lady. It's all right here. Evangeline of Oceano, California, says, I saw a dark watcher just about dusk in June of 2016. He was standing near the ocean cliffs, just outside of Hearst Castle. No one could see him in our party except for myself. I walked toward it, and it vanished. I also had a sense of foreboding, an eerie, scary feeling. Joey of Sylmar, California says, I'm a long-distance runner, and most of my training is up in the good old California mountains. I had a long run scheduled, so I headed out to Veterans Park here in the San Fernando Valley. The time of day was 2 p.m. I was running and up in an area where no human could climb without gear. I saw a black figure in the plain light of day. I've never seen anything like it up in the mountains. It was darker than dark. I can't explain it. A year passed, and today again, on January 24th, I saw it again, and in the same spot. Jason of Rosenberg, Texas says, I saw a dark figure about 7 foot tall in one of the mountains by Vernal, Utah. It was a late winter, lots of snow. The moon was full. The light reflected off the snow, so I had no problem seeing. I worked nights for a seismic company as a troubleshooter. I heard a crew member say on the radio he had seen Jeepers Creepers. He dropped everything. He dropped everything he had and ran back to his truck. Wow, there's some hearts appearing in the chat. How do you guys do that? That's amazing. Thank you for the hearts. I saw it 20 feet in front of me. My heart starting to beat fast. I tried to run, but it was hard because of the snow. As I was running, it seemed to float on the snow. It moved really fast and started to circle me. Then it stopped. All I had on me was a pocket knife. I pulled it out and started to pray to God to help me fight if it started to run towards me. It got about 10 feet away. Then it started to move back fast. I lost sight of it in the dark. I never saw its face. It had a robe like the Reaper. I don't know what it was. Anonymous of Northern California says, these are Masonic rituals. End of discussion. Mind your own business, people, for your own safety. Cindy of Florence, Alabama says, I first saw a shadow figure. I thought it was a person. It was standing over my friend while he was asleep. When it saw I could see it, it ran down the hall of the house. I ran after it, but found nothing. Brave chick. Then afterward, my friend took his own life. I woke to the same being at the end of my bed. I was worried about my baby. So I asked it, "Where's my son?" It told me he was watching TV. My son was about 3 months old. So I thought the thing was lying because my son was a baby. I jumped up to find my son with his father watching TV. I really have the feeling that it was not evil. I just think that it's being so weird was what scared me. That's an open mind for you right there. Caroline of Santa Barbara, California said, "There's a beautiful new book about the Dark Watchers. John Steinbeck's son, Thomas Steinbeck," which we're going to check out during the next reading break right here. There's the book itself, the first page with a dedication. And an artist friend of his, Benjamin Brode, have made a really cool art and storybook about Tom's memories of the Dark Watcher stories from his dad and grandmother, Olive. It's really beautiful. It's called In Search of the Dark Watchers, Landscapes and Lore of Big Sur. You can find it online. It's a nice little advertisement there. Elizabeth Benitez of San Mateo, California says, "I remember one day my friend and I were coming back from Los Angeles. We passed the San Luis Obispo Reservoir, and as we drove on the road, I saw something at a distance, down at the end of the mountain. It was a really big human figure, but it wasn't. It had a black cape, like the Grim Reaper, and it was leaning over, holding onto a staff, near a puddle of water, or so that's what it seemed at a distance. It was daytime, too, so I could identify it wasn't a person. Even in mid-light, he was very black and reminded me of a raven. I told my friend that I was driving to look over at the mountains, and surprisingly, she was able to see it as well. I asked her what she saw without giving her my details, and she repeated what I was thinking in my head. She only looked at it for about 5 seconds, but she was able to see it. She almost lost control of the car as well when she looked away at it, and I begged her to go back and see it, but she was very tired of driving already. These Dark Watchers are real." Brian of Hollister, California said, "One early morning when my car was in the shop, and my sister was taking me to and from work in Salinas over the San Juan Grade Road. We were coming up to the San Juan Bautista Hollister side when we saw a very large dark figure standing at the edge of the mountains, which is extremely weird since I've never seen anyone cross over the barbed wire fence, and I travel that road daily and at all hours. We drove by it slowly. We drove behind the figure, noticing it staring off into the distant valley and mountains, Fremont's Peak. It appeared to have a large cape with straight shoulders that were very broad. It seemed to have a hunch on its back. At first, from a distance, I thought it was a condor, but when I got closer, it stood almost over 10 feet tall. It did not notice us driving behind it, but when we found a spot on the cliff road to turn around and get a better look, it was gone. This was around September 2010. Kickboy Face of Moreno Valley, California said, "Interesting stuff. Many years ago, I was with a friend driving through a dirt field here in Moreno Valley near Alessandro, the old east part, near what I believe were old abandoned barns that I had always heard were haunted when my friend's car broke down. That I always heard were haunted when my friend's car broke down. Could have been a coincidence. It was a Volkswagen Bug. It was dusk at best, and there was no way we were going to make it out of the field before it became pitch black. And instead of chancing getting lost and or hurt in the dark, we decided to sleep in the car and set out in the morning to go get help to tow the car. It was way before the days of everyone having cell phones and quick help. As we were killing time in the pitch black now, we were hanging inside and outside of the car, sharing smokes, and we started to distinctly see what looked like black shadows, evenly distributed, completely encircling us. They did not move. They stayed motionless, but were of significant size. And based on the distance, I would say at least the size of a small car like the Bug in which we ourselves were in. Whatever these were seemed hunched over, perhaps kneeling. Time passed. They never moved. And though we walked around the car and got in and out of the car to see if what we were seeing was some sort of optical illusion, they did not change, and we couldn't explain or discredit what we were seeing. To this day, it racks my brain.